if you've had a vehicle long enough, more than likely you're going to have to end up doing transmission service. But what do if it's got a lot of miles and you don't know the history? My 1998 Dodge Cummins is really a hand-me-down from my father-in-law. He used it on the ranch and hauling stuff and doing all kinds of different things. And for the most part, he maintained it through dealerships, shops, and things like that. That man was the hardest working man that I know, but he ended up getting Parkinson's, and he ended up having it for a little over 10 years before he passed away some years ago. Anyway, it needed a lot of maintenance because towards the end there, he didn't really pay attention to it. It was neglected. So there was a lot of maintenance items that needed to be done. And when I checked the history, it turns out that it was over 100,000 miles that the transmission wasn't serviced. I took a look at the owner's manual, and basically, because it's an automatic transmission, it says to drain and refill. If it was a manual transmission, then it says to flush it. So since I have an automatic, I'm going to drain and refill. There's no two ways about it. But real briefly, there's two schools of thought on servicing a transmission. The first school of thought is never, ever, ever flush it. Why? Because when you flush it, it's done at a shop. It introduces pressures that sometimes will exceed the limits of the internals of the transmission. It could push debris throughout the internals of the transmission and get lodged in different channels and things like that. And you might think that you got it all out since you're flushing the transmission, which removes about 85 to 90 something percent of the old transmission fluid that's in the system. Okay, and there's been a lot of stories about people doing that and then their transmission doesn't work right or it fails after that service has been done. The second school of thought is just drain and replace. And when you do that, you're only removing probably about half of the old transmission fluid, and you're also removing and replacing the transmission filters. So either way, you know, a flush probably have a longer interval of miles versus a drain and refill, which typically is going to be somewhere in the 30,000 to 50,000 mile range. And depending on the source that you look at, you know, this particular vehicle says every 24,000 miles to service the transmission. So that's what I'm going to do. You'll see what kind of job this is for an at-home DIYer. It's not difficult. It's just a little messy. You'll see. Yep, my concern was that this stuff is burnt and the color looks good. I actually bought 3 gallons of this Valvoline ATF plus 4. Take a bath. Starting to come out now. There's a transmission fluid rain. Probably only get about 1/3 of the transmission fluid out. Got the pan more or less clean. Now I got to get this gasket off. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that, but the new gasket doesn't have the metal encased in rubber. You want to clean this transmission pan best you can. Not like you can eat cereal out of it or anything like that, but you know, get all the gunk out of it and any of the old stuff. Here's the magnet, and yeah, there was some metal shavings in there, but no large chunks. So the big question is, did I lose too much clutch material, right? Is this going to be an issue? So got the magnet all clean. In the bottom of the pan, there's a little raised section that you center the magnet on so it doesn't move from side to side. For good measure, I also cleaned as best I can the bolts, and there are 14. So there's 4 on this side, 4 on this side, 3 on this side, 3 on this side. Keep track of your bolts. You don't want to lose any of them. The transmission filter came with 2 different gaskets. So it's up to me to make sure that I use the right gasket. And I've heard you could use Vaseline or whatever to keep the gasket in place, but I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and put these bolts up in there, which should hold the gasket in place all the way around. So when I'm ready to put it back on, I don't have to worry about the gasket slipping. If this is the second time you've seen one of my videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That's it. All right, got all the bolts accounted for, the magnet, clean pan, ready to put this thing back on, but I've got to switch out the transmission filter. This guy right here, now I haven't checked to see if that's the right one, so we'll see. Get some of this stuff off. I'm using a nylon brush here, it's not metal. Certainly not a situation where you want to use an impact to put these on, because you can definitely over torque these and crush the gasket, the seal, and then you'll get a leak. Because with 14 bolts on this transmission pan, that's 14 points of possible leakage. Okay, now we have the transmission pan on there kind of snugged up. We got to do the bolt sequence, which is kind of like left to right, up and down, across, and the other way, and then back and forth. So it's almost like a star pattern. The torque settings for a 47 RE transmission is 120 inch-pounds. That's good. All right, so we're done. Well, that was from my spill earlier. I don't see anything leaking. So the test drive went well. Got it up on the interstate, doing about 75 miles an hour. Transmission wasn't slipping. Everything was working the way it's supposed to. So that's what it should do. Now, how long the transmission will last, don't know. The vehicle's got about almost 330,000 miles. So there's a lot of miles on that transmission and that engine. Now, if you didn't know, this is actually my first time doing the transmission, so if I can do it, you can do it. It was a bit messy, right? So you have to be prepared for that. Make sure you have all the cleaning supplies that you need. A drain pan big enough to collect all the old transmission fluid as it's dripping out. I learned a lot from this. The shops around me will charge anywhere from like 100 to 250 bucks to do a drain and refill, and for a flush service you're looking at anywhere from around $200 to $400. So what did it cost me? It cost me about 50 bucks. I had bought 3 gallons of the ATF4 fluid. It only needed 5 1/4 quarts, and the filter cost me, I think shipped and everything, was about 15 bucks. Since recording this video, I had to do the transmission service on my Jeep. Did the same exact thing, a drain and refill, and what I learned from doing the Dodge is I wish that there was a drain hole in the transmission pan. But I don't drive the truck a whole lot. I don't know when it's gonna be another 24,000 miles that I'll accrue on the truck, but on my Jeep, that's a whole different story. So when I did the service on the Jeep, I actually replaced the transmission pan, the original, with one with a drain hole and plug in it. So that way, when I do the service later, I simply just undo the drain plug, drain out most of the transmission fluid, and then I can take the bolts off the pan and then drop it so I don't make a mess all over the place. And by the way, the remaining gallons of ATF4 that I had is the same spec for my Jeep. So all I really had to do was buy the filter and then the transmission pan for my Jeep. So all in all, I saved a ton of money doing this myself. Appreciate it. Until next time, have a good one.